Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for joining our session today. We are going to be having another look at API integrations. I have with me my colleague, Ishmael. Ishmael, good morning.
Hello, good morning everyone.
And this is actually a kind of continuation of one that we did a couple of years ago, actually, on API integration. We had some very strong feedback that this was a very well received. This was a kind of hot topic then. It's absolutely that now. We're seeing more and more people requesting and wanting to investigate integration with third-party tools and automation. So we thought we would be putting a good idea to put another session together so we can go through this in a little bit more detail, get some framework about the approaches and everything. So on the screen at the moment, you can see that we have some links. The first one, probably one of the biggest ones here, is our blog area on our website. We put quite a lot of content up, guides and how-tos and everything to allow people to get a lot more benefit from the SolarWinds platforms. And so in terms of the agenda, we want to just go through and discuss the reasons. Why are people looking to automate? What are the benefits? There are significant benefits. Clearly, we're moving into this kind of DevOps arena and have been for the last several years. The SolarWinds monitoring platform very strongly fits in with that kind of mentality. The data that exists in there, the functionality that it performs, there's going to be very significant capabilities of that fitting into an automation stack and sharing data with other parties. So when we're working with our customers, we're always very keen to make sure we do things right. We make sure we have the right discussions early on. We identify what the goals are. We make sure that the teams are understood and everything in terms of what people are looking to benefit from this. This is not something that you just want to sit down at your text editor and just start tapping away and creating some code. It does need some thought and planning. We're going to kind of share some tools, how to use them, how to benefit from them, how they fit in with that life cycle of that development and testing. Because we see a lot of differences in the approach, just kind of sharing how we do things internally here at Prosperon for our customers, things that we've learned and tips in terms of putting those codes together. A key thing about this, clearly, we're talking about integration and development. What is the SolarWinds API? How can we benefit? How can we leverage it for our benefit? So Prosperon, just a little bit of background on who we are, what we do. We are a company that have been around for 14 years, which always catches me by surprise when I see those numbers going up each time. So from our point of view, we are dedicated and focused monitoring service providers. It's our remit and our objective here to make sure that we have the level of knowledge to support our customers in that arena. So all the things that we do, all of the things that we sell, all the relationships that we build are about providing that monitoring and system and network management solutions. We recently partnered with NetBrain, which is a network automation solution, and very proud to be their first partner, and that's a solution we've loved for a long time, and thankfully we were able to become their first UK partner. I know, having looked at the list, we are providing a lot of services for people on this session today. Lots of engagements. Our team is very capable. We've got 8 SCP qualified engineers at the moment. We recently won awards from SolarWinds as being their partner in EMEA with the best technical resource and capabilities based on what we do, what we know, and certainly what we are delivering for our customers. And personally, I'm very proud to be a THWAC MVP and everything that goes along with that kind of exposure. So from a professional services point of view, we provide direct consultancy. So it's the planning, it's the preparation, it's the design, and then moving that through to the implementation of all levels. What we are specifically talking about today is this API and this data integration and development focus, and it's certainly something that is a big interest area and a big growth area for us as an organization. We're certainly seeing a very big uptake in terms of that for custom deployments. So we're just going to have a quick poll just to kind of set the scene, get you guys involved immediately. So the first question here is, we want to kind of understand how you are, and if you are currently using the SolarWinds API. We've got a few people saying that they're SolarWinds API magicians, which is really good to hear. What I would like to do at the end of this is follow up and see what you guys are doing. It's always an interest to see things that you're doing, the conversations that we have with our customers, where we can drive that, and things like our blogs that we can create specific blog posts, or indeed future webinars with more focus on the things that you are actually achieving. Okay, fantastic. So we've got a clear winner there in terms of people that have got some APIs in use, API magicians, but the one that you're is winning there is the fact that you're not doing anything, and that's why you're here today, which hopefully at the end of it you'll go away with that knowledge to be able to move forward. So why do we do API integration? What can we learn? What can we achieve with automation? Well, there are big benefits behind this. There is that whole efficiency. If you're doing things multiple times, Ishmael, who here likes creating and populating custom properties and groups from our engineering team?
Yeah, I think I can add myself to.
Yeah, so we have a library ourselves. There are common tasks that we do, creating custom properties, creating groups, as I say, and views and various other things that, from our point of view, we identified that we're doing this all the time. It's not particularly exciting, but particularly for customers, if we're able to spend more time doing more advanced and better things rather than sitting there doing quite laborious aspects, then we have that, say, our script library to improve that delivery for it. From your point of view, similar kind of things, the ability to automate and have that data quality. If you've got an authoritative source for your data and you can script the integration of data or processing around that, it takes out that human error problem. And so that is something that is a big driver, that human error issue and the efficiency of performing those tasks. We'll see as we go through in terms of the integration piece, where we are able to have triggers, or where we're able to perform tasks to share data, share event information. So clearly a big one behind all of that, as we can see on this next slide, is the alerting integration, that we can put that exchange of something has been identified by Orion, maybe an actionable alert event. Well, the sooner we get that into our help desk platform, the sooner our service desk or the operatives using that service desk application are going to be able to work in it in an efficient, focused, built for purpose tool.
Yep, maybe at that point I can give an example, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
For one of our customers, we have created a custom alert view page, and we have provided a button to integrate their alerting system with Remedy.
Yeah, and yeah, we can discuss that. I know which one you're talking about there, as you mentioned, Remedy, the joys of the Remedy API. But yeah, that was a particularly good example, actually, Ashmal. In the that customer wanted the ability to automatically generate alerts in their ticketing platform, but because they've got a very strong service desk, they wanted that human eyes on it before they moved it into that layer as well. So there were some alerts would automatically go, and other alerts they wanted to push in there manually. So we had a discussion and we recreated the whole default alert listing page so they can press a button, and then that pushes that alert at that point into the Remedy and creates the ticket on the fly. So again, discussions, design options to allow that to work. Actually, the one at the top is another common one. A lot of customers are going to be creating or receiving from their service providers maintenance schedules for devices. Well, you don't want alerts being generated down through the system at that point. So automating that when you have that in your ITSM platform, that there's a maintenance window going to happen, and we'll see actually today how we can use that as an example of making sure that that profile is assigned and we keep that information up to date. So other things that we've got on here, I've kind of wrapped up this into that kind of DevOps landscape. Orion is an immensely useful data source. We are collecting information from your environment constantly. We're making sure it's accurate because we are querying those devices and those applications. So being able to use that data source and push it up to third-party systems, whether it's an ITSM or CMDB type application, is important. And actually, conversely, bringing that data back from that platform to say, actually, this is a device that's owned by this team, and this is the service contract on it, and this is the physical location. That is data that, again, is that side of the coin is the authoritative source. So doing data synchronization is a big benefit of making sure, again, that data quality and efficiency is benefited by. This is an essential ingredient. A bit of a soapbox. If you have been a customer, we are quite strong in kind of forcing you guys to work with us and putting a plan together. We do not just want to be kind of sitting down and starting coding, as I say. So from your point of view, this is an essential step. Why are you doing this? You can see on that diagram there, actually, if you've got the time, if you've got the value, and you've identified that value, what is it you're looking to achieve? Are you going to benefit from it? This whole thing about kind of going a coded route, if you've got the capability and the time to put it in place, and you're doing things on a regular basis, or that the data quality assurance isn't there or whatever, then you have an absolute driver to benefit from going with this kind of API-driven solution. So identifying that, how does that fit into existing processes? Is this going to influence those internal processes? Are you going to change them to align to this function? Or actually, do you need to mature those processes so that actually you're going to get the proper benefit from this? These are things immediately you need to review, understand, that will then drive your ability to determine whether you're going to move forward with this kind of functionality. And then from a technical standpoint, we have very rarely been in situations where we can't automate or integrate, and typically those are restrictions on the platform. I actually made a bit of a joke about Remedy. The older versions of Remedy, and actually the newer ones still, don't have the best API interface. So sometimes we do encounter problems where we cannot achieve all of the functionality we need because of the limitations. Those limitations may just manifest in the fact that we have to write our code for a SOAP interface rather than a RESTful JSON interface. That we have security issues to overcome in the fact that we cannot open the necessary ports to do the network communication for them to talk to each other. So again, all part of the planning phase. How does this align to the technology, to the business needs, and then clearly this ability to then deliver and maintain it. If you're going customization in anything in IT, you need to have that assurance that you have the ability to create it. Do you have the necessary internal skill sets? So from our point of view, a lot of the coding that we do is based on PowerShell. That's one of our coding strengths. Other companies, other users maybe focus more on Python, etc. But if there's one person that does Python or Go, and everyone else knows a bit of or enough about PowerShell or other languages, then is that a driver for choosing the right solution? Ishmael, go ahead.
Sorry, Mark. Maybe at that point I can add. Yep, we prefer to use PowerShell, but based on customer requirements, we are also creating scripts in Perl, in Python. So we have independence here based on the requirement, based on the third-party product here. We can adapt our API integration for different programming languages.
Yeah, I say that is all part and parcel of aligning to the customer needs. Again, if expedition, ability to create it rather than maintain it, if we're asked to deliver this in a different language, then obviously we will have those discussions about which is the right way forward on that subject. That last line in the research requirements section, script versus application versus process management, the first two are kind of are very much the same. Do you create a PowerShell script, or are we going application driven where we're going to create an exe or something that's a compiled function? And then the last one is that process management solution. So this could be something like Zapier or if they're now functionality. So from those decisions, there could be existing solutions that can be leveraged to perform that functionality rather than going down the customized route. Always, cannot stress this enough, create a development environment. We've had situations internally where somebody's just created a little script, think it's very safe, go ahead and do it, press the button too soon, not got the right value in there, whatever, and brought down a production platform. Don't do that. Create a test environment.
Oops, Mark, I wasn't expecting that you will mention our internal things here.
Shush, it's fine. We all do the same things. But as I say, it is something. But if you're doing any coding, using the API or anything else, create that development environment. The trial version is fully featured and functioned. It's available. It works for 30 days, so you can build it, develop against it, test it, and go forward with that. And if you need a full-time environment, then SolarWinds do provide SolarWinds development licenses to allow you to have something, as I say, as a permanent solution. And then out the back of all of this, create a plan. Create a plan that you follow, that you review, that you're constantly identifying. I know, having worked with developers for a very long time, if they hit a problem, they'll just get their head down and keep working on it, and then I get told that they're 20 hours over schedule. Those are the kind of things that, say, in terms of delivering this as a full project, bear in mind. Some tools. So we use tools. I'm going to go through this very quickly because I want to show this in visually. So SolarWinds Studio, an absolutely essential solution to include in here. So as part of the API SDK from SolarWinds, you can download, you can install this, and you can use this very strongly to identify data structures, create your queries, look at the verb entity definitions, which will really accelerate your ability to code against the Orion platform. That can also just be used in general terms to create custom queries for your resources. If you want to create a custom chart and you need to do it as a query method, again, that is a really useful solution. And then for code editors, I've kind of put some examples here, but you have free reign. Whatever you're used to, whatever language you're utilizing, there is probably a good and bad code editors to utilize. Some of them are full-blown IDEs. So the Visual Studio Code is a very good example of a strong IDE where you can take advantage of putting compiled code together. Whereas something like Notepad++, Notepad itself, whatever, you're just going to create a script entity. It's quick, it's easy. I think in terms of the examples today, we're just going to use the standard PowerShell ICE interface. I've kind of put a comment here in terms of dark theme because everybody I see that is a developer and is scripting will immediately put a code editor into dark theme mode. Postman. So you're working against an API, either purely just on Orion or on the other side of the solution as well, depending on what you're achieving. This is a magnificent solution that allows you to test your API queries. You can do your read, get responses in, confirm that the data is correct, make sure your headers are correct, put your parameters in place, do all of that in a visual interface. You can validate that everything's working before you then start transitioning that into a code-based scenario, which is going to be a little bit more troublesome to do that kind of interactive testing and such like. And curl, a kind of command line version of that. So those are two good methods for testing your REST API calls for the API interfacing. So just a quick bit of background in terms of what the SolarWinds API consists of. We have a solution here that's a web service API. There is a SOAP interface, but pretty much everything that we do is against the RESTful JSON interface. As you can see, we can support any language that can call and interact with a web service API. So again, whether your preference is Perl, Python, Go, PowerShell, .NET, Java, yeah, anything along those lines can be utilized for this. Map that to your internal capability. The benefits of using the API, rather than just saying, oh, can't I just update the database directly? Yes, you can. The risk of breaking things is way greater. So it's definitely not recommended to go down that route. And also the abstraction that occurs, you're going to get better long-term support. So when things develop and when things move on, every version of Orion that comes out, an update to the API typically comes along with it. You'll have backward compatibility built into that. you get access to the SQL Studio or SQL Studio, and this is a CRUD interface API. So we are able to create, read, update, and delete objects and interactions with the operations of Orion and the data within it. So it's a very powerful interface. Ishmael, you're going to be showing the link to GitHub, so I shall move on from that. A very good and useful resource for you to be utilizing. You're also going to be doing the SWCL query language. Just in terms of the slide here, SWCL, the SolarWinds query language, is a kind of shorthand version of SQL syntax. So your select statements are going to be very similar. There are some objects and functions which are not fully supported. So select star, for example, is not supported, but there are really nice ways of utilizing this, the shortening of queries, and the fact that we've got inbuilt pagination. These are really big drivers, but when you're utilizing the API, SWCL is always going to be the preferred direction to go. And you'll see that absolutely in action very shortly. So just going to go into our second poll here. Having discussed what I've discussed so far, it'd be interesting to see the things that you're either doing. Yeah, so those that in the previous poll identified that they're already doing automation functionality. Be interesting to see what you are doing. Anything else that you are looking at doing? Okay, so we've got some good votes there. Wow, that is interesting. So pretty much most of the people there are indicating that all of it is on the list. Okay, that's excellent. I'm hoping then today you're going to get some good benefit out of this, and you can start moving forwards in that right direction. So let's just cut across now into the live demo. Ishmael, you're going to take over this. You can see on the screen we've got some things that we're going to be showing through in terms of practical functionality. So Ishmael, do you want to share your screen? And
sure.
Okay, fantastic.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. So we can carry on with API discussion. If you want to use SolarWinds API for automation tasks, first of all, our requirement is Orion SDK. In order to access SolarWinds API, we need to install Orion SDK. You can install this on your SolarWinds server, or you can install that software on your local PC in order to develop custom scripts, custom applications to access SolarWinds data and change, update SolarWinds data. This API is a software development. This SDK is a software development kit containing documentation, some examples, and tools in order to use SolarWinds application programming interface. And I would recommend you to download the latest release. If you try to use beta, I don't recommend to install beta 1 on your SolarWinds server, not to cause any issues in your production environment. And when we have this installation, Orion SDK installation, then we will see SWQL, SWCL Studio, where we can generate SWCL queries. We can define our queries. Let me quickly show that information here. So when you install SDK, you will see SWCL Studio application here. It is similar to, when we consider SWCL, it is similar to SQL structure. So you can type your query in a similar format to SQL, but there are some differences. And primary difference of SWCL is, as you know, SQL query is run directly on your database system, but SWCL query uses SolarWinds information service. So as you see, we need to provide access to our SolarWinds user interface. We have to provide an account here in order to access SWCL Studio. So if I provide, sorry.
So Ishmael, one of the questions and issues that we come across quite a lot is, where do you install SWCL Studio? Where is the best place?
If you want to run scheduled tasks here, Mark, then I would recommend to keep this installation on your SolarWinds server. So we generally recommend to install this product on primary polling engine server for your platform.
I know that you, for example, have this on your laptops as all of our engineers. So you use this from a development point of view rather than kind of a runtime function. Is that right?
Exactly. For example, if I want to see latest features, I generally install the beta one to my PC, but for the SolarWinds environment on the polling engine server, we always install the latest release and confirmed release instead of beta product. So here we see our server definition. I opened SQL Studio on SolarWinds Server. We have localhost connection here, and we can see objects at the left side. These objects are coming with your modules. So if you have some module, server and application monitoring module, you will see APM related items here. If you have network configuration manager module, you will see NCM. So that part is coming from your installation, your installed modules in SolarWinds. Basically, that platform provides read-only access to SolarWinds data, but we can do more. Let me just show you an example. If I expand Orion one, we can get Orion nodes object here. And when I expand that one, as you see, we have available fields, attributes on Orion nodes area. We can quickly type a very basic query here, and we can get device name from caption, and maybe we can also get node ID information from that object. When we provide that query, we just need to click on run, or you can use F5 button on your keyboard in order to run that query. And then we can get data as you see here. If you don't want to type these columns, you can also right click on object and you can select, for example, generate select statement, and then you can execute that query in order to see all the data on your Orion nodes object. Just to give you an idea about the fields we see here, as you see, we have a golden key icon here. It shows unique ID on this object. So we have node ID attribute here for this object. And we also have blue prism icons, and these are showing primary attributes of that object. And if you scroll down,
it's fair to say those blue icons are essentially the table columns as they would be in a database. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right, Mark. And we also see inherited attributes here in these green icons. So these are also similar to standard attributes, but these are coming from different objects. And if we scroll down, we also have a link structure that's really interesting, because with that structure, you can use direct link without a need for a join statement to related objects. So you can just define implicit join to any object that is defined here. And if you scroll down here, as you see, we have lots of link definitions on Orion nodes object, and we also have verbs. These are pink icons. These verbs can be considered as functions that we can use in our scripts, in our applications. So if we want to define, for example, an unmanaged operation for nodes, we can see that there is a verb definition for it. If I expand this one, we will also see necessary parameters in order to call that specific verb. So as you see, we have to provide 4 different parameters in order to execute an unmanaged operation through SolarWinds API. Just to give you a brief idea about the difference between SQL and SQL queries, let me just show. We have database manager here. We can create new query. Let me get my query definition. This is the database query, which gets down interfaces with device information. So if I execute this one, I can see my down interfaces on each devices. And we we have, as you see, 5 different rows here. And as you see, we are using a join statement between nodes and interfaces objects in the database. If we try to get same information in SWQL, let me just get related query information for it and provide it here. We can run this query, and we can get same information from that query.
See, now this is the thing that I love most about SWQL. When you've got complex queries, and I know some of the queries that I've generated, and certainly some of the things that you guys have created, you have massive join structures, and you'll look at it and it's just incomprehensible in some places. You kind of break it down, and is it an inner join, an outer, lots of different things. This massively simplifies that. You can just see from that code, can't you? Just on a very simplistic example.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really useful. I really also like that link structure, which really helps us when we are creating queries. And I also want to show, as you see, we have different options, and we can just right click and get available attributes on any object. We can see available functions. And it's a good idea to do a test for these operations. For example, we have different operations here on Orion node objects. If I expand others, we will see different definitions for each of these objects in SWQL. In order to test these verbs, in order to test these functions, we use another tool. Maybe Mark, you may add something.
I was just because before you move on, the interesting thing in terms of that structure, and is the way you navigate through. So I can see from that query in SWQL Studio that you've got your entity name, you've got using N, and then you've got interfaces.caption. So that's going to the interfaces table and bringing back the name of that interface. So as you can see from those other link icons, that convention there is the N dot, and then you could choose inventory, interfaces, whatever's there, dot, and then whatever the content of that entity is itself. So you've got that full exposure, and that's that structure. Can you do multiple levels? So can I go from the interfaces link on down to something else from the interfaces table?
Yes,
so
Mark, you can access to different objects, and this is also really useful. So you can access from, let's say, nodes to applications, from applications to components. So we can go in different levels when we are creating queries in SWQL.
Yeah, and again, that's a massively powerful thing. Again, the join and subjoin structures can be removed at a heartbeat just by having n dot an entity off of interfaces.caption to go and bring in that data. Just before you move on, Ishmael, we have had a few questions come in. I realized I didn't say at the top of this presentation, in the GoToMeeting panel on your machines, there is a question section. By all means, ask questions. We'll go through those at the end. So anything that you see here, if anything kind of jumps out, you're not quite sure, please use that question. Any issues that you've had maybe doing API work yourself, jump it in there and we can discuss those at the end. Sorry, Ishmael, go ahead.
That's fine. Thank you, Mark. In order to test these verbs, these functions, we are using a tool which is known as Postman. Let me show the interface to you. You can download that tool from internet. Let me just show the link to you. You can access getpostman.com, downloads link, and you can download latest version of that tool. When you have this tool, then you can define these API operations. You can define your JSON queries in order to check access to your API before creating your script or custom application. So if you want to define a request here, let's click on new request option. Maybe we can just carry on from that one, which is easier. We can provide our URL. just to give you an idea, if you want to get data from SolarWinds API, you can run a GET request. And in this case, you need to provide a URL to access query method of SolarWinds API. So if I provide that information, this is our server IP address, and this is the default port in order to access API. And we are using information service, JSON link, and after JSON part, we are providing query string here. As we are defining GET method, it is a requirement for query to define query parameter. So if I get my query here, which is a very basic select statement on Orion nodes object, we can define our query parameter and we can give the value like that. When we give our query here, we can go to authorization area and we need to provide a basic authentication method in order to access our SolarWinds platform. This is my user currently defined to access our SolarWinds platform. When we click on preview request, we should see that related username information is passed to header area for our request. And then as we have necessary query information and authentication information, we can click on send and we would expect to see output on this user interface. So as you see, we received 200 HTTP 200, that's fine. It's showing OK status and we get response time and we see data for our query. As you see, we are asking caption, node ID and vendor information on Orion nodes object. And as you see, we have all nodes in our environment.
So what I'm seeing there in that query is a SWCL query. I can tell by the entity naming structure there. So essentially we can pass any query there, all right?
And you should provide a SWCL query here, but you can define any query. For example, you can open SolarWinds Studio, you can create your query here. It can be a complex one. Then you can provide it as parameter in this area.
That's fantastic. And that JSON structure that's returned is aligned with the select fields that I've chosen at the top there.
Exactly. So you can change your visualization mode, but generally we prefer to see pretty in order to see in a user-friendly view. But you can also get raw data and you can see all items in standard JSON object here.
So just to kind of recap on this, make sure I'm following along. So we could do this query in SolarWinds Studio, confirm that the data that we want to come back is what we want to come back in our code. We then taken that into Postman, put that into the query object interface on the API, and we can then validate that the results we get back are correct. So that data set now, if I was turning this into my code function, I now know I can utilize that in my dictionary if I'm using Python or the PowerShell entity option. So now I've got the data to now work on in the rest of my code.
Yeah, exactly, Mark. So by this way, when we run that GET request, now we know how to get data from our SolarWinds platform. But in addition to getting data from SolarWinds, it is also necessary to update data in SolarWinds. In order to do this, we can define another request here. Let me create one more request. And if we want to invoke a verb in Postman, we have to change our method from get to post. Then we have to provide a URL here in order to invoke our method. Let me provide URL information and give you some details about it. If you look at the URL structure until JSON area, it is similar to our GET request. But after that point, we have to provide invoke here in order to invoke a verb on an object. And as you see, we are invoking unmanaged verb, unmanaged operation on Orion.nodes object. So if I go back to my SolarWinds Studio, and if I look at my structure here, as you see, our object is Orion.nodes. And if I scroll down here, our verb name is unmanaged. So we have to keep that structure when we are defining that URL in Postman. So when we give this information, we don't need to provide any parameter here. We have to provide our request in body. So first of all, let's check our authorization area. So we can inherit it from the parent, and we can say here, for example, let's click on body, and we can define our JSON object request here. In order to do this, we have to click on row, and then we should change our data type to JSON. Now in this area, I have to provide my parameters. As you see, we have 4 different parameters: net object ID, unmanaged time, remanaged time, and is relative information. So I have to provide a JSON array here in order to get that information. So that is an example data. We are running unmanaged operation on node ID 3, and we are unmanaging from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for today. If we click on send, I think I have an issue about authorization. Sorry for that. Let me select basic authorization, and let me use my credential settings and add this one to header. And let me try to run that one again.
The demon god strike.
Yeah. So this time, as you see, we have 200. It's OK status. We see null information because we are not requesting any information. We just see output, and that's the reason we have null information here. If I go back to SolarWinds, our managed nodes page, let's check if we have any unmanaged device.
I know you're not using the new entities interface.
Unfortunately, Mark, I'm still not use this new
we
one.
still don't like it.
Yeah. So we have our managed window object here, and as you see, we have related node here. If I mouse over, I can see it is node ID 3. So our Postman operation works as expected. So we have seen an example on Postman to run these API requests. So I think it's a good idea to check some examples in real world. I just want to show an example we use also for our customers. As you see, if I open our summary page, we have a worldwide map definition here, but it is empty. We don't have any objects, and it is really difficult to keep that map definition up to date. Because when you populate a new device, if SNMP location information is not set in a perfect way, generally it is not working.
Never is.
In this case, we need to populate our map manually. And if you are adding devices in your environment frequently, it is really difficult to keep that part up to date. So in this case, we recommend to use an automation task. In our example, we have defined a custom property in order to show current map address information for our devices. So we have populated most of the values for our environment, for our test environment. So as you see, we have different locations. And on SolarWinds Server, we have a script definition for it. Let me show this on PowerShell ISE. I'm really happy using that tool because it is designed for PowerShell. If you are creating your script in PowerShell, it is really useful. You can directly execute it. As you see, we first need to add our snap-in for SolarWinds. when you have SDK installation, you can add the snap in successfully without any problems. And when we run that script, it is using a CSV file at the background, but you can use a third-party database. You can define a web request to a third-party tool to get geolocation information. So it depends on your requirement and your current infrastructure.
Yes, I know from what we've done previously, that kind of data source, just for this demonstration, we've done it as a text file, but ordinarily this would be something like a site definition that had a postcode perhaps, or an address that could be looked up, and then we integrate with an API online that will then convert that into coordinates. Yeah, so you can see here at the data structure, it's essentially all we need.
Yeah, this is just an example to see current location and geolocation mapping. When we define this one, and when we execute our script here, let's see the results. So it is running the script, it is defining some objects. We have a log file here. We can check our log data if it's running as expected. And then we can go back to SolarWinds user interface, and we can check our summary view, and we can give a refresh to see populated devices on that worldwide map structure. So as you see, we have devices in different locations. We can see down devices, problematic devices in these locations using that worldwide map utility. So when you have new devices, if you populate that custom property correctly for your existing locations, and if you define that script to run in daily basis, for example, then you will see new devices on this map automatically. And if you have new location, you just need to populate new location information into your input file. So let's look at another example, because as you see, this is using a CSV file and it is based on a background task. Generally, we recommend to run this as a scheduled task, daily or weekly basis. Let's look at another example, which is depending on ServiceNow integration. So
this is the one that is a big interest for customers. We see this and have this conversation a lot. We are using ServiceNow here, but this is essentially any ticketing platform. Every single ticketing platform that we've ever worked with has an API, maybe not be a great one, but it has an API that will allow you to achieve very similar functions here.
Just to give you an information, in that ServiceNow instance, we have defined one of our nodes. So if I remove grouping here, we have a server here, Windows Server. It is Prosperon 01, and we have defined that device as an asset. So if I look at assets on ServiceNow, we can check hardware assets, and let me quickly search our custom definition here. So our server is defined here as an asset, and as you see, it has different fields. We can see current owner information, we can see current details. We are using here asset tag to keep device name, and we are using serial number field to keep node ID information on SolarWinds. So this is the integration point with SolarWinds. If I go to manage nodes, if I mouse over on this device, as you see, it is node ID 10.
But typically that's going to be an IP address or something, isn't it? A unique identifier. For this demonstration, we've got a hard-coded ID.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can define your custom fields in ServiceNow, and you can integrate, you can use different fields for integration. I just want to show you an example here. We have that device in use state. If I update this as in maintenance, and if I click on update, we can define business rules in ServiceNow, and we can use SolarWinds API in order to update our device status information. So if we go back to manage nodes, and if I change my grouping for unmanaged window, this time you see this is the device we unmanaged. In the background task, we defined 1 week unmanaged period. So we see this information for the device. And we can directly unmanage our device from ServiceNow user interface.
So I know in terms of what we've done in this demonstration today is a kind of manual assignment, put it into a managed window, it's kind of preset, but certainly with regards to things like ServiceNow where you're using a change management routine, you would have other fields, you would have your start date and end date, so you can schedule this for the future. You know, when your ISP sends you that notification that on the 24th of November between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. there's going to be an outage, then immediately you can come and map this in and it will get applied. I think
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. You can extend and you can use custom fields. Just to show you the details about that structure, we have REST message definition in ServiceNow, and we have defined our endpoint. And as you see, this is the same URL information we used in Postman. We just used IP address in order to access from ServiceNow. And we have variable definitions here. We have predefined fields, but we also have a script. We define this for testing purposes. We have actual script running as a business rule in ServiceNow. If we have time, I can just briefly show you this information. So on your business rule, you can create custom business rule definition based on conditions. So we have unmanaged node business rule defined on asset table. And if you look at here, we have a condition, we are checking state, and if it is in maintenance, we are executing a script in order to change status information on SolarWinds side.
So we've got that whole intelligence piece in ServiceNow, looks for a field change value, kicks off a script, interfaces with the API, performs its task, reports that result.
Yep, and
excellent.
You can also extend this. You can run this integration in 2 directions. So you can also execute your management process, unmanaged operation from SolarWinds, and you can also change your object on ServiceNow using similar structure.
Fantastic. So we are 5 minutes away from the top of the hour, finish time. I'm keen, obviously, to finish on time. So we're going to. I see we've got a couple of questions come in, so I'm just going to throw this out there. But while we're kind of answering this, if you do have questions, please put that into the question thing. So we've got 5 minutes for questions now. But if you have something, if you want to follow up to this event, then please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to have a more in-depth conversation about anything that you would like to achieve with your integration API. So we've got a question here from Dave. He says, so in SolarWinds, you make an API user. Does it need to have specific settings or security, any exclusions? So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that you showed that you had a specific account. Is that the kind of best practice? What do you normally do?
Yes, we normally recommend to use an API integration user. If you want to just select data from SolarWinds, then you can define a read-only account here. But normally, if you want to change any settings on SolarWinds, then you should provide necessary permissions to your account. So if you want to unmanage your nodes, then that user account should have node management rights on SolarWinds.
So the API follows the user access rights for the account that you're using. So in that situation, you could have a script which has kind of delegated rights. So when a particular user maybe provides their credentials and they try to execute something, that would fail if their user access control didn't allow them that function. So again, you've got inherent security layers over the top of that API, which is another major benefit of interfacing with the API rather than the database directly, for example. Another question here with regards So if you can just bring up your code again, we just visualize one of your scripts there. Your PowerShell one, please. So the question here is around that credential definition and you mentioned a snap-in. So just to clarify the situation on the snap-in in terms of this PowerShell, that is a library function. That's a pre-built part of the SDK, is that right?
Exactly. So it is provided for PowerShell. We can just directly use standard methods coming with that library.
And in terms of that connection,
yeah.
I can see that you have a structure there. So this is very important. Whichever scripting you're working with, you don't want to be storing in an open text file the login credentials.
Exactly. Maybe I can give some details here. As you see, we are using a file, encrypted file here in order to get this information. Normally, we suggest to define your scripts using and schedule your scripts using service account. You can generate that key file for your service account user by defining another task. So you can define a task, you can generate this encrypted file, and then you can just delete that task. Then you will be able to use that file in order to authenticate your user for SolarWinds user interface. So we don't recommend to use open password definitions on your scripts.
Fantastic. So we have, it's basically within the language definition about how you securely pass credentials. In the case of this, we could have used the method that prompts the user to supply their credentials rather than having it pre-stored. We have one more question, I think, for time-wise. So the question here from Sumit is: we have direct integration option with ServiceNow, but most organizations using third-party tools. So direct integration is less powerful. Okay, so I think this is related to the fact that in the alerting engine of Orion, there is an inbuilt action to integrate with ServiceNow. It's very good. It's easy. You literally provide your API key to ServiceNow within the Orion interface, and then you add that action to your alert, and that will then allow you to pass data values to ServiceNow. So that's going to include things like the severity of the alert, the name of the object, the text of the issue, what the category is. So all of that is kind of pre-built, but you are right, it is less powerful because you have to work with what is available within that GUI. If you need logic, if you need extended information that then goes, before it does something, it does another query to ServiceNow or a third-party application, then you have to go a scripted route to put that logic in, to put those different additional calls in, to use a data structure which isn't available in the GUI. Then you can utilize the API and scripting functionality to do that. So yes, it's not as powerful, but because it's so quick and easy to use, the vast majority of customers will be using that. I hope that answered your question, Sumit. We are 1 minute over. Ishmael, I thank you for that excellent demonstration today. I think it's been hopefully very useful for everyone that attended to see that.
Thank you,
as I say, any follow-ups that anyone has, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to help. But I very much thank you for your time on a Friday. The pubs aren't open just yet, so otherwise have a good afternoon and enjoy the rugby tomorrow. Bye now.